Look, I opened this jar of rotten baby food, and well, a butterfly came out.
But the part that makes me not like is sometimes it would be like, okay, you made 5 jokes in a row. Can we get back to you being a therapist and not being
Oh,
like a comedian in here?
oh
And
yeah, five
I
jokes in a
feel
row.
some shame about it. Well, it looks like McMahon.
Welcome to the Comedians in Elevators podcast. I've got my guest Danielle McMahon. Danielle, say hi, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Danielle McMahon. I'm a voice actor, and I'm pretty new to voice acting. The last 7 years, I was actually a therapist. So it's a very big career shift, but one that I am really excited about. I've always loved performing and talking a lot. My clients kind of know a little bit about that. Uh, and I just got some caretaker burnout, and so I loved my job
Uh,
very dearly, and I'm thankful for all the years I spent as a therapist, and I'm excited to be in the creative field now.
awesome. When you say therapist, you mean voice therapist or mental therapist?
Mental health and relationship therapist. My degree is actually in marriage and family therapy, so I worked with couples a lot, but I also worked primarily with individuals. It kind of changed a little bit over time.
All right, awesome, awesome. Well, Danielle, you ready to get started?
Yes, I am.
Listen, to my regular listeners, I know you don't like when at the beginning of these conversations I ask you to subscribe. None of us like it. I don't like saying it. I don't like it being in here. But it's frustrating. You know what else is frustrating? It's also frustrating when I look in the back end of the YouTube channel and I see that 56% of you that watch frequently haven't yet subscribed. And I know this because I see it in the comment section. You say things like, I didn't know I didn't subscribe. And that's actually what fuels the show. Basically, it's like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask all the time, because it enables us to build and build and build, and we're going for the long term here. Hit the subscribe button, and we'll continue to build this show for you. That's my promise. Thank you to all you guys that do subscribe. It means the world to me.
All right. So the whole point of the podcast is to compare and contrast the comic versus the comedian. So I define the comic as any person telling funny jokes versus the comedian who's a funny person telling any jokes. So Danielle, would you agree that you start as a comic and evolve into a comedian?
I would say so. I don't know. What I really liked about this question is it reminded me of um, something from actually an episode of Lucifer where they were talking about comedians and they were talking about the difference between the person who writes the jokes and the person who tells the jokes. And like you can be somebody who's funny, you can write jokes that are funny, but if you can't deliver it in a funny way, then there's a difference there. And so I kind of was thinking about that a little bit with the difference between a comic and a comedian as well,
Mm-hmm.
of like any person can go up and try to tell jokes that are written that if the jokes are funny, that helps. So I feel like I kind of started with maybe as a comic a little bit, but the comedian is a funny person telling, any jokes. I feel like maybe I would say I actually have always kind of had more of that in me where like I had a hard time not kind of turning therapy into a little bit of a stand-up routine sometimes.
All right.
Where I'm relating to the person, and this relates to questions I know you're going to ask later, but relating to somebody um, and building off of what they're saying is kind of where my humor tends to come from. So I don't know where that would fit, but I would think, I can end up creating jokes out of more so as out of building off of what I'm talking to another person. So I don't know. I think it's a hard question, and I think it's a really interesting one.
Do you think that comics are mostly writers?
I would think, yeah, probably. Well, I don't know. I guess that goes back again to are they a funny person? You kind of are. You still have to be a funny person either way, but yeah, I think the difference would be the comedian's able to deliver it in a different way.
Yeah, when I say funny person, I mean I'm meaning externalized.
Right.
A writer is funny on the inside at least, otherwise it wouldn't be able to do it
Yeah.
to some degree, right?
Of
So
course.
the problem with words, just like I'd see this as two sides of the same coin, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, ready for the first question?
Yeah.
All right, so it's about the role of persona in comedy. So how much of the comedian's voice is a character versus the real self?
I think that really depends on the comedian. So the formatting of where they're telling their jokes. So I feel like stand-up comedians really create a persona versus like my favorite comedians are not usually doing stand up. They're usually like my favorite comedians are the McElroy brothers. I don't know if you know them, but they do a comedy podcast where it's three brothers who are talking to each other and they have material like people send in advice questions and they respond and they make it into something funny. Or like Caleb Heron, he has a comedy special now, but he doesn't really like doing stand up. He prefers having guests on his podcast and being funny with them in that space. So I think if you are doing stand up or if you're in a sh like a TV show and you're being funny, I think in that case it's more of a persona. Um, I'd say maybe even like Bo Burnham is more of a persona because he does the music and stuff. Ron Funches probably even has a bit of a persona, but there's still that authenticity there too, which I know we're gonna get to, but um, I don't know
We
if I answered
can.
your question.
So, yeah, absolutely. So does authenticity matter?
Yeah, I think that is another thing that depends on the audience. Like if you're somebody who like I like it when I can tell that the jokes are coming from an authentic place and it's coming from that playing off of people where it's a connection. I really enjoy that kind of comedy the most. Um, but I think if you're performing, I don't think you necessarily need to be authentic. Like if I think about like SNL, like they're playing all sorts of wacky characters. They're not being themselves. They're bringing their ability to read the room and to make things funny into the persona that they're creating. But um, yeah, I don't think comedy has to be coming from a place of authenticity. I like it when it does, but I don't think it has to in order to be funny.
So you're saying, so basically character work is not necessarily authentic?
I guess that's kind of what I'm saying is, yeah, it's actually part of what I like about it is you get to try to be somebody else. I think you could probably still bring your own you bring your own skill to it, but I think yeah, maybe character work is I would say is not necessarily authentic, but takes skill, obviously.
Now, what if that character is your subconscious? Would that still not be authentic?
That I think would be probably authentic. Like if you go for roles that let you
Beady, beady, beady.
explore like a different facet of yourself, and you're doing that because that's something that's fun and engaging to you, I think you bring an authenticity to that role that can make that role even better and funnier, or just better performed even if it's not funny.
All right. All right. So how about punching up versus punching down? So where do comics versus comedians subscribe to this? And I'm sure you're ready. So did a jealous medieval prince become the first comedian by killing the court jester?
I think that's really funny. I think that the court jester is the comedian, and the medieval knight is the one who's saying, "Nope, that's too far," because the whole point of the court jester was to make fun of, the royalty, but you're still the jester was still the butt of the joke in some ways, like historically, like you're still
Yeah,
supposed
they're
to think
the
of them as a
jester's the
fool.
punchline, right? They're the
Yeah, you're supposed to
punchline,
think of
but
them
the
as a
setup.
fool.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So like the punching up that the jester is doing, I think is more funny than the punching down, which makes it just a performance of power, kind of, in my personal opinion. I know there's
Mm.
people that think it's funny. I think it can be done without it being extremely offensive, but I don't like it. I don't like punching down. I think it's just like you already are in a position of power if you're punching down. Like that's part of what means you're punching down. So it's like how I don't know. I don't think that that's funny. I think punching up can be funny. It's not always funny. Sometimes it's just kind of political, but
Hmm.
I usually don't think punching down is funny. And I think the comic, I don't think the comic or the comedian necessarily has more of a tendency to be in one realm or the other, personally.
Yeah, I tend to agree. There's no nexus there. So would you say that criticizing dead people is considered punching down?
Ooh, that's a good question. No, I think it depends on the person. Like, I think we could make fun of Hitler all day long, and it's not disrespectful, but I guess it depends on the dead person and what you're saying, I guess, if
It's
that
not
makes sense.
disrespectful? Could it still be disrespectful, but we disregard that it's disrespectful?
Yes, I think it's still disrespectful. I think it's still disrespectful, and there are times where I guess I think it's okay. I guess maybe that's hypocritical of me. I think it's okay sometimes to be disrespectful,
Mm.
and
It's a
sometimes it's
hard
funny.
it's a hard
But
one, you know, Hitler's a hard one to analyze because you would, if to drill down a little bit, double click on that one, if he had to do it for history to progress, then he was serving a role. Therefore,
Mhm.
you have to respect that role. So not everyone would agree with that premise, though.
Right, yeah. I guess I just tried to pick somebody that is universally usually considered evil. So I was
Yeah.
just thinking, like, I don't think most people care if you are punching down towards someone who has done a lot of harm to others. I guess maybe that's where my personal where I'm okay with it in this case, even if maybe that makes me hypocritical. I don't know.
Right, but we want in the end of the day want it to be funny, right? So that way we figure
Yes,
out, well,
yeah.
what is the way that it still would, because usually they're really not funny. Like Hitler jokes aren't funny,
Yeah, it's just kind of like, okay.
but they could be, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So would you say the audience agreement with the comedian is a form of permission or alignment?
Um, that is also really fascinating in when it comes to also that context of punching up and punching down. Um, I think the audience can like something and think something's funny even if they don't agree. I think I'm somebody who can be a little bit like more easily offended, so I think for me, and people like me, maybe it's they wouldn't even want to laugh at something. It kind of happens upon being like in alignment. That's the only time I find it, not the only time, but that's one of the times I find it funny is if it's in alignment with how I think. I'm like, oh, you're so right. Ha ha ha, whatever. But I don't think necessarily if somebody is enjoying a performance or laughing or likes a comedian that has said something problematic before, doesn't necessarily mean that they agree with those problematic beliefs. So no,
I'm
I don't think so.
I'm curious what how you get offended if you say you tend to get offended. Is it because of lack of specificity?
Could you clarify that?
So
Not where
so
I thought you were
typically
going.
I know, right? So typically, like arguably, you could say that, you know, hate is laziness. You're being too broad in general with your emotional energy, right? But if you were more specific, it would be you wouldn't find it to be as offensive. Like you hate a group, it's too general. If you
Right,
hate one
yeah.
individual that happens to be in the group, it's less offensive,
Yeah, okay,
right?
yeah. I could see that. Yeah. Yeah. I
So
never thought about that. I think that's really an interesting point. Yeah. Like making fun
right.
of a specific person is not the same
Well, you could say that
as
you can address that they're in a group. So
yeah.
then you set up the offense. Oh, I'm going to be offended. You're talking about a group, but then that's just the setup to put that you're actually talking about this one person and the group itself is just kind of background. So it's anticipation for offense, but really you didn't actually say anything about the group at all.
Okay, yeah. I don't know that I would be offended in that case. I think that kind of um taking you along for the ride, like that's part of the setup of the joke and they're like, "Oh, what's gonna happen?"
Right.
I think I'm always braced for it to actually just be offensive and have them just double down and be like, nope, we're actually saying things that are just basically hateful towards groups of people. And that's the whole joke. And I guess I'm just always worried about that because I think in like when I was finally old enough to start like exploring my own media, I guess, like in the 2007, like when I was like in middle school in like 2007, 2008, YouTube was first beginning. And a lot of what was on there was supposed to be like comedic sketches and started out with mostly kind of slapstick stuff. But I feel like so much of comedy at that time was trying to be offensive. Like when I try to watch something like Super Bad or, um, which is a little bit later, or what was when I was surprised I was not as offended by the movie Idiocracy as I was expecting to be, but like movies around that time, it was like everything felt like the whole point was just to make you either repulsed or offended, and that was the whole joke. So I guess I'm always braced for that, and that's what I mean by I can be offended easily. Um, and I just don't like jokes that are like putting people down. I just don't really think it's very funny. But
Yeah.
when you
It
talked
shouldn't be the
about that
punchline.
setup and yeah, when you
Exactly.
talk about it in that way, I'm like, okay, so that's kind of different from punching down. And that I think can be done very craftily and very well.
Hmm.
Kind of makes me think of John Mulaney. I haven't seen a lot of his recent stuff, but in New in Town, he talks about at the time, his wife at the time, who was Jewish, and he brings up some stuff and he's like, it's going to be playfully anti-Semitic. It's okay. Like, but then it's not anti-Semitic. He's just talking about his wife. And then,
Right, exactly. That's a good
that's
example.
fine. Yeah.
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 He's doing it craftfully, artfully. All right. So how about love and justice? So when a joke harms someone unintentionally, does love demand accountability or does justice demand defiance?
Yeah. I really like that question. And I don't know how to answer it exactly. I think it would be both love and justice to go with that accountability. I'm a little unsure what you mean about when you talked about justice and what did you say that wasn't accountability with justice? What was justice?
What is the accountability? So now I'm confused by the question. So
Sorry.
the whole, well, it's very dichotomous. I mean, the question is framed in a way where there's no direct simple answer, right? It's
Yeah.
kind of in a spectrum. So there is no typically there's no right answer, even though I've heard some pretty close to doing that. Yeah, the idea is that if someone gets offended and you're not intending to offend them, which is a great example, is you're talking about a group in general, right? And then you don't really do a good job of getting to the specific. And so you weren't trying to really be offensive. You were trying to be funny, but you didn't do it well. And
hmm
so if you're like the comedian and they tried something new, are you saying, no, you must, I'm going to hold you to account for this? Or,
I think
or are you just going to like protest?
oh, I see. Okay, yeah. Um, I think giving the opportunity, and this kind of ties into, I think there might be a question about cancel culture, but this is related. I think there's a way to go about being accountable without it having to be a complete, like, cul- cancel, like you're completely done, you did one bad thing and forever we're never going to like you again. I think if you can handle the accountability part, then we don't need the canceling part. Like if you can say, "Oh, I realized this joke landed this way, not what I meant at all. Here's how I actually feel about this group of people. I have made some changes to my routine and I'm not going to do that joke again." Like if you're able to do that with grace and like take the feedback, if you really did hurt like people and it like wasn't just one person who incorrectly misinterpreted it, if the way that you presented it really did sound as offensive as that person took it, I think that there's definitely ways to have accountability for that and then move on and continue to do different comedies, make adjustments without it having to be a complete protest. But there are times where it can be really bad and you just do kind of have to be like, I'm not gonna watch that person anymore. Like that was messed up and they doubled down on it. And if they don't care that they hurt people, then I that's a whole
What
other
if you,
story.
okay, I'm imagining I'm trying to figure out a setup for this. That's why, because
Yeah.
if you start with a racial group of humans, but
Mhm.
you end with the specificity of somebody's dog, but a specific breed of dog, which is a general statement, do you get offended by proxy?
I'm not sure if I followed what you were saying there. So if they
I'm going to have to
start the
write the joke
specific,
and then,
okay,
yeah,
yeah,
because you're going
you'll have to
from
come up with an
so
example.
I know. Well, so general group, racial group, you get down to a specific person in that group, but then you switch the joke, part of the joke, to
Like the
their
punchline to
dog.
be,
The punch,
yeah,
but the specificity is about their dog, but then the
okay,
punchline is about the breed of dog. So you went
okay.
back to the general.
So you went back to kind of like
Uh,
almost
uh,
if you were almost kind of comparing breeds of dogs to races of people, kind of like you
exactly.
found your way over to another thing.
Yeah.
Um, I think it really depends on what they're saying. And
Implying because the punchline, so it's a totally implied. It is not said at that point because
okay,
that's just how you structured the joke.
right,
So talking about jokes and structure could be very
right,
tricky. So I'm gonna
yeah,
move on from
okay,
that one. So very important question:
all right.
advertising and self promotion. So who advertises themselves more, the comic, the comedian, or the magician?
You know that place where you're not conscious and you're not sleeping either? That's your power bill to the electric company. Right here. I want us to be here with free energy, where the Wardenclyffe Tower meets the Eiffel Tower. But that's not where we are. We are here where you've got the utility and you've got residential solar. Between these two, we know which one saves you money. This is where we can go in the meantime. But this is where I want us to be now, and this can be done now. So let me deputize you to represent DOSE, Department of Solar Efficiency, and let's get on the podcast and get the message out today. See you soon.
Ooh, adding the magician is a really good idea. I don't know that magicians self-promote enough because I don't think I could name a single magician to save my life. Well, except maybe does Chris Angel count as a magician?
Yeah, what happened to him? Yeah, I mean, didn't
I don't
he?
know.
Yeah, for
Where's he
sure.
been? I have no clue. But
Yeah.
so I couldn't name a single magician aside from, I guess, Chris Angel.
The one you
So
mentioned. So there's a setup.
I guess there's one. But so I don't know that I would say that magicians self-promote really much, at least not in the circles I've seen, but I would say probably comedians self-promote more than a comic who just kind of wants to be funny but isn't creating this whole structure to like I guess I think of the comedian as more of a performer than the comic is. Um, and I think like a lot of your guests, it's kind of necessary that self-promotion. It can become
Mhm.
annoying, but it's really kind of the only way these days to get any
Yeah.
traction, especially when you're first starting off. Like you have to kind of just go up and be like, "Hello, I'm funny. Please let me be funny in front of you.
Please laugh at
Um,
me. That's what you're saying. Yeah.
please clap, please laugh. Any platform I can get on, I need to get on as many platforms as I can so that I can get some traction going,
Yeah.
and some legitimacy." So I would say probably the comedians self-promotes the most. I don't know if comics really care. I think they just are people who want to be funny and they tell the funny jokes, whereas the comedian's kind of the performer level. And then magicians, I don't know. I don't know anything about magicians
Except for Chris Angel. So
except for Chris
what
Angel. I know he exists. I know some of his things.
or
Didn't
did?
watch him because most of the time they involved things like putting knives in him or making it look like, oh, there's no way he's not injuring himself, and that
Right.
part is grosses me out. Like I know it's not because he's surviving it, but I don't need to look at
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. That's definitely, he's figured something out. So then what don't you want me to know about you, Danielle?
Ooh. Um, I don't.
Yeah. So you have to think of the thing and then go somewhere else.
Yeah, I guess what do I not want you to know about me that I
Uh,
would be willing to still share on the live, on the recording? Probably what I don't, I guess I would say something I don't like admitting that I make jokes about it. I already did at the beginning when I was talking about making my therapy sessions into stand-up is sometimes I can get lost in the thoughts that I
Forefront?
have. If I'm talking to somebody, I have the bad habit of sometimes I do go for the laugh, I guess. Like that what they say not to do in improv, where like sometimes I just can't help it. So I guess I would say I'm ashamed to admit that sometimes I'll make it about me, and I don't like that.
Right.
But I've worked on it, so I guess that's something I would say I don't want people to know is that I struggle with that because it's embarrassing because
Oh,
nobody likes a selfish
no.
person.
No, that's good. But so okay. So how so you're okay. I'm trying to figure out how you exactly were doing that, but we'll move on to the next one. So censorship and offense. So who survives better in a cancel culture environment? The comic, the comedian, the magician, or the mudslinger?
Hmm. I would think the magician just because I simply can't think of why they would get canceled in the first place. Um,
Maybe that's what
like,
happened to Chris Angel.
oh, yeah, maybe that's why he's gone.
I,
Maybe
I
people
don't know. He
hated him,
canceled
and
himself. He's like,
yeah, he
I'm
canceled
done.
himself. He's like, I made enough money, I'm good. Um, I think probably the comic would be the second most kind of, I guess, would do the second best because other people aren't thinking of them as you are a performer who is saying this content is funny. Whereas a comedian is like, here is my whole performance and my whole shtick. I feel like it's harder to separate that out. So I feel like it's easier for people to be like, well, you had a really offensive set, you're done forever and ever. I feel like people are more interested in whether or not if you call yourself a comedian, whether or not your jokes are funny and whether or not your jokes are offensive. If you like, people care more about it if you call yourself a comedian. So I would think that they'd be the most vulnerable to cancel culture of the three.
Okay. So would you say, timing and delivery, is it a science or an art?
Definitely an art because I really think you have to be able to, well, again, my most of what I think is funny comes from building off of like having more than one person and letting them build off each other. But if you are performing solo and there's an audience, like you have to create for lack of a better word, a vibe with the audience. Like you have to be able to figure out, are they in it with me? Are they checked out? Like what's going on? And then that can influence, like, once you're in it, you kind of have to have a natural instinct, I guess, or a learned instinct of how to land the joke, what timing, and like, do I wait for the applause? Did they think that was funny, or should I just move on? Like, I think it's definitely an art, but it's something that I think you could learn it, which I think a lot of people don't think that art is something you can learn. It's more like, oh, you're good at it or you're not. But um, yeah.
Yeah, it's sad. So, well, I don't say it's sad, but is it so it's about determinism, if you think the world is already predetermined or not, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, when does a comedian cross into being a philosopher or a preacher?
I I meant to look up the name of the person before we got on here that I was thinking of, but there are some comedians that I do like, but I like their sets because they're primarily talking about like their life and I wish I remembered who this person was. Um there's a gay woman, or maybe she's trans. I don't remember. Anyway, there was somebody that I related to because I'm part of the LGBTQ community, and my girlfriend at the time recommended that I watch this stand-up set, and she's like, I know it says it's a stand-up set, but it's really more of like, here's my life, and then there's funny parts about it. So I think sometimes comedians will have their thing be like, this is almost like a motivational speech, but I'm going to be funny about it. I think that's where it
Right.
kind of can blend into that. And sometimes comedians explore what even is funny. So I think then they can kind of turn into philosophers or preachers. And I think you have to be careful not to be too preachy, otherwise you lose some of the comedic effect. And I don't think all comedians can go into that zone and still be funny. I think you kind of have to almost be more interested in this part and then add in the funny. I don't know. Did that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's a tricky thing to do though. It takes a lot of time. So, is truth treasure in heaven?
I don't know what you mean by that. Sorry. Can you
That's
say
great.
that
No,
again?
is truth treasure in heaven?
I don't know. I think I have a hard time with the concept of what even is truth. To be honest, I
That's
get
what I'm saying.
existential about it. So,
Exactly. It is, right? So
okay.
you can't take treasure with you, but
Yeah.
can you?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know that I know. I don't think humans can know what happens to us after we die. So I have no
Ah.
idea. Like if,
This is why I asked that question. It's pretty, that's the difference between if you see it that way or not. So,
yeah. So I don't know. I don't think truth is I don't know that you can take anything with you. I don't know if we just stop existing or what. I don't know. I don't think we
ah,
can know as humans what happens after that.
okay.
Um, so
Well, speaking of not knowing, Danielle, are you ready to enter the multiverse?
I don't know. Maybe.
Oh,
We'll
okay.
see.
All right. Well, we'll say yes for now.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
board game Zoomcast, play versus performance. So you have to choose an avatar. So if comedy were a board game Zoomcast, are you competing as the colorist avatar, adding tone, mood, and shading, or the Foley artist avatar, building punchlines with soundscapes and timing?
Oh my gosh, that's such an interesting question. Um, Probably I'd say the Foley artist because um the part that this kind of ties back into what I was saying earlier that you said you weren't quite sure what I meant of how I sometimes will go for the joke. Um, if I do better when I build off of something that's already there. So I think
Mhm.
if the colorist is in there and they're setting everything up, I can get that kind of that vibe
Mhm.
going and I figure out where we're at. And then I'm pretty good at finding the timing of, well, if I throw this joke in here and I deliver it this way, then it'll land. And I'm only really willing to go for the joke if I think it's going to land, kind of. Not
Okay,
but
yeah.
not all the time, but that's going back to the thing I don't like to admit was like when you go for the joke in a situation where it's not really meant to be like there were times where my clients loved it. I only made jokes that I knew that they were going to receive well and they weren't at their expense or anything. And it involved maybe sometimes making fun of the people in their lives that treated them like shit. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on here, but
That's fine.
uh,
Would you tend to do the joke at the end of a session to close it out?
no, sometimes it would be in the middle when basically kind of trying
Transition?
to let them know how much I relate and let them know that you're allowed to vent in here and we can just say, I'm sorry that person's a shithead and that they treat you really poorly. Um, but the part that makes me not like it is sometimes it would be like, okay, you made 5 jokes in a row. Can we get back to you being a therapist and not being
Oh,
like a comedian in here?
oh
And
yeah, five
I
jokes in a
feel
row.
some shame about it. Well, again, I knew my clients really well. I'd worked with them for years at a time. So the clients really didn't mind it. I just felt like, okay, this isn't what I should be doing right now. That's where I
Right.
go, I don't like admitting that. But I think if my clients watch this to be like, yeah, yeah. That was her, but we loved
Right.
her, so it's fine. But that's where I like bring it back to the Foley artist thing. I think I'm funnier if I'm helping it come to fruition versus coming up with the premise in the first place.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know if that made sense how that all ties together, but hopefully somebody was following along of why those things related to each other at all for my brain.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So here on the Comedians and Elevators podcast, we have a tradition where the previous guest asks a question for the next guest. And the previous guest was Matthew Lindquist. And his question for you, Danielle, is Oscar Wilde said, comedy is easy and dying is hard. Or was it the other way around? Was he correct?
Oh wow. That you said comedy is easy and dying is hard, or was it the other way around? Is that what you said?
Yes. And is
Or
he
that's what
correct?
Oscar Wilde says. Oh gosh, that's hilarious. I think dying is easy and comedy is hard because of the ways that you can fail. Like if if I didn't know my clients as well as I did when I made those jokes and I was just sitting there trying to be a comedian as a therapist, like that would have been a huge flop. That would have made them feel bad. Like it would have
Hmm.
been terrible. Um, and so it's hard to be funny and be like, again, the timing is everything. The context is everything too. Like, when is it appropriate? I feel like comedy is really hard, actually. Even being a comic is really hard, just saying funny things, whatever, versus dying. It's just like, oh, that is the human way. Like, it's the easiest thing you can do is just stop living, I guess. I don't know. I love Oscar Wilde, just saying, especially as a I'm bisexual, but I love Oscar Wilde. Anyway. I don't know
Well,
if that answered
yeah.
the question very well, but
Well, it's, I mean, I basically the question went two directions at the same time. Both, it was like, which one was it? So yeah, I pretty much answered it. So, all right, last
good.
question. Legacy. Who gets remembered? Will the comics Tight Five survive time, or will the comedian's cultural point of view be more timeless?
I think the comedian's cultural point of view will be more timeless because it also we preserve some of that. Like I even brought up some of the, comedy. I put it in quotes because I didn't like the the comedy at the time, but the comedy style of like 2000 mid 2000s was pretty distinct and there's these eras of different types of comedy where like slapstick was more common or whatever the structure is. And so you can become a legacy of being an example of specific things. Like I still remember Chris Angel. I don't know why I'm bringing him up so much. I don't usually think about him very often, but
Yeah,
I think that
he's in your memory palace.
he's just sitting around. I guess that's where he went. He's in my memory palace somewhere. I got trapped in there, I guess. But yeah, I think the comedian definitely has more of the legacy than the comic. But I think also on a personal level, you'll remember your friends that you're like, oh, that friend was so funny, or if my clients loved me, so they're probably, oh, my therapist was so funny. Maybe sometimes she could have gotten, moved it along a little faster, but
You have to go an
so
extra
there's
time.
legacy
So
either way, but it's different. It's a different kind of legacy. There's like a cultural level legacy versus like personal, which Also ties into the Oscar Wilde dying thing, but I'm a yapper, so I'll just, we can wrap it there.
All right, awesome. Well, Danielle, where can everyone find you online?
DanielleMcMahonVO.com for Danielle McMahon voiceover. My name's a little hard to remember the spelling when you hear it, so just look at the name on the title of this podcast. But on there, you can listen to my demos. I have a narration demo and a commercial demo. And then on Instagram, it's also same exact thing, Danielle McMahon VO, Instagram, Blue Sky. I use both of those quite a bit. Instagram, you can see more of like my fan dubs and character work. And on YouTube.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Danielle, thank you so much for being my guest. And for everyone, please like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.
Thank you for having me.
If you're interested in too much information like in the network state or Mantipus the chicken shit, check out this video. Or is it this one right here? Well, either way. Lizard.